Hey Em, what's good? Ready to level up this quest?
Hi, Sai. Absolutely love. Welcome back, everyone, to Electric Memories, where we unlock the hidden layers of the world's greatest football clubs, level by level. If you're joining us for the first time, we're deep in the AFC Ajax Chronicle, our Eredivisie series opener. Last episode, we ignited the spark. Those teenage schoolboys in foggy Amsterdam canals dreaming big, the chaotic false starts, the 1900 founding at that historic East India cafe, the gritty early defeats on makeshift pitches, the iconic red and white striped kit born from a simple clash with Sparta, the breakthrough promotion in 1911 that finally cracked the elite level, and Jack Reynolds planting those revolutionary seeds of fluid play and youth development, while the club survived the unimaginable horrors of Nazi occupation. Now, we're leveling up. This is level 2, the revolution, birth of total football. We're diving into the post-war rebuild, the fierce fight for professionalism that shook Dutch football to its core, and the man who grabs everything Reynolds planted and explodes it into something that redefined the beautiful game forever. Rinus Michels, the guy widely seen as the father of modern football.
Facts. Em, this is where Ajax transforms from a tough, resilient Amsterdam underdog into a force that influences the entire world of soccer. The scars from the war are fresh, the country's rebuilding brick by brick, but the club's unconquered spirit, it's about to catch fire. Let's start right at the moment of liberation in May 1945, when the Allies finally free the Netherlands from 5 brutal years of Nazi occupation.
Yeah. Sai, imagine the raw emotion of that time, the streets of Amsterdam filled with cheers and tears as the tanks roll in, but beneath it all, a nation in ruins. Over 200,000 Dutch lives lost, including a staggering 75% of the Jewish population, the highest rate in Western Europe outside Poland. The hunger-winter famine of 1944 to 45 alone claimed 20,000 souls, leaving players and fans alike malnourished and haunted. Football? It becomes this beacon of normalcy, a way to escape the nightmares and start healing together. Jack Reynolds, that English father of Ajax we talked about last time, emerges from hiding 64 years old, a British national who'd been interned briefly during the war, and steps back onto the pitch. He patches together a squad from the survivors, holdovers like Guy van Dijk and Jan Pothorst, who carried the club through the darkness, and injects fresh blood with young talents like Rinus Michels, who makes his debut in 1946 and starts lighting up the field with his intelligence and strength.
Man, it's symbolic Reynolds rallying this battered team to win one last national title in 1946 to 47, his 8th overall. From dodging bombs and hiding in attics to lifting silverware again, it's like the club itself is saying, "We're unbroken." But Reynolds retires that year at 66, passing the torch. His successors, like Bob Smith from England in 1947 to 48 and the Dutchman Karel van der Lee from 1948 to 50, keep the flame alive by sticking to his philosophy, that emphasis on skillful attacking play and nurturing youth. They snag regional titles in 48 and 50, but nationally, they're mid-table, scrapping against rivals like PSV and Feyenoord, who are rebuilding just as fast. The games are gritty, the crowd's emotional swelling to 10,000 or 15,000 at Het Houten Stadion, that wooden venue that's become a symbol of home.
And to really understand this era, Sai, we have to talk about the cultural backdrop that shaped everything. Pillarization, or verzuiling in Dutch. This was how Dutch society organized itself from the late 1800s right up to the 1960s, divided into these vertical pillars, like Catholic, Protestant, which had its own orthodox and liberal splits, socialist for the working class and secular folks, and liberal for the middle-class urban types. Each pillar had its own world, separate schools, hospitals, unions, newspapers, political parties, and yes, even sports clubs. It was all about managing religious and ideological differences in a small country, promoting tolerance by keeping everyone in their own bubble, which reduced fights but created these isolated silos. Post-war, with the trauma of occupation still raw, pillarization actually helped stabilize things. It gave people a sense of belonging and structure amid the chaos. Catholics got funding from church networks for their clubs, Protestants from religious groups, socialists from labor unions. Ajax, with its urban Amsterdam roots, middle-class vibe, and strong Jewish community ties leaned toward the liberal pillar. Fans mostly stuck to their own pillar worlds, rarely mixing at games, but football started bridging those divides, offering a shared escape where you could forget the silos for 90 minutes.
Exactly. And the fans. They responded to pillarization's stability with a mix of comfort and quiet frustration. For many, especially the older generation who'd survived the war, the pillars were like anchors clubs, became symbols of identity and pride in a world that had nearly fallen apart. Pillarized media hyped matches as battles for pillar honor, which boosted attendance and created that electric atmosphere in the stands. But the youth? They were starting to chafe against it, all the post-war resentment from those myths of widespread resistance during the occupation, when in reality there was a lot of gray area with collaboration. Tensions simmered, like those lingering anti-Semitic chants at Ajax games from rival fans, a painful echo of unresolved scars from the Holocaust. Yet, overall, fans saw football as a unifying force, a way to rebuild community spirit. By the late 40s, those crowds at Het Houten Stadion weren't just watching games, they were reclaiming joy.
Fast forward to the early 1950s, 1950 to 1954, and the pre-professional struggles really kick in. The coaches during this time, Robert Smith, an English forward who'd played in the reserves for clubs like Burskov and Bolton Wanderers back home, joined Ajax from 1950 to 1952 because the club was still chasing that English tactical edge from the Reynolds era. He brought know-how on fitness and structure, won the regional title in '52, and got them to second nationally that year, before moving on to minor coaching gigs in the Netherlands and back in England. Then Walter Crook, another Englishman, a solid left-winger who'd starred for Blackburn Rovers in the 1930s, even reaching the FA Cup final in 1933, and later Bolton Wanderers, took over from 1953 to 1954. He came for similar reasons: Ajax's tradition of English discipline, and he stabilized the team with his emphasis on organized play, getting them to second nationally in '54 before heading back to England, where he coached Tranmere Rovers, a lower division club in Merseyside known for its gritty working-class roots, from 1959 to 1961. Both guys were bridges to the future, but the amateur rules, they frustrated everyone. No full-time training, no real resources.
That's right, and the players? They weren't getting paid enough, or really, at all, in the official sense. The amateur rules were strict, only reimbursed for basic expenses like travel or kits. Top talents might sneak black money under the table payments, maybe 90 to 100 euros or $100 to $110 today, a month, or get cushy jobs from club-affiliated businesses to make ends meet. But day jobs meant training was part-time, just 2 or 3 sessions a week, leaving everyone exhausted and the quality suffering. Compare that to other leagues. England had been professional since 1885, with salaries around 35 to 40 euros, or $40 to $45 today. A week for pros. Italy and Spain went pro in the 1920s and 1930s, where stars pulled in 450 to 500 euros, or $500 to $550 today, a month. The disparities were massive. Dutch players felt trapped. Unions like the VVCS, formed in 1953, started fighting back with strikes in 1953 to 54, demanding fair pay. The exodus of talent was real. Take Faas Wilkes, the Prince of Dribble, who bolted from Xerxes Rotterdam in 1949 to Inter Milan in Italy for a signing bonus of about 4,500 euros, or $5,000 today, plus a monthly salary of 2,250 euros, or $2,500 today, 10 times what he could have scraped together in the Netherlands. Others followed from Ajax in the league. Abe Lenstra to Italy in 1955, Cohen Dillon from PS5 to Italian clubs. It was a brain drain that lit the fuse for change.
And the arguments from the KNVB, the Koninklijke Nederlandse Voetbalbond, or Royal Dutch Football Association, were all about preserving the spirit of the game. They claimed paying players would corrupt everything, bringing in gambling, commercialism, and inequality where richer clubs dominate. The pillars, who were societal groups like the Catholics and Protestants, who saw pro sports as almost sinful. A break from moral amateur purity backed that view. Fans were divided. The traditionalists, especially older ones tied to their pillars, romanticized the amateur era as pure and noble, a holdover from pre-war values. But the younger fans and working-class supporters, They craved the excitement and higher quality that pros could bring. Tired of watching their stars flee abroad, media outlets hyped the growing chaos, building pressure for reform.
Speaking of chaos, let's talk about the Wild League. It's this rebellious breakaway that really shakes things up, and it all starts brewing in the early 1950s as the amateur frustrations boil over. By July 1954, 10 clubs like Fortuna 54 and Stormvogel say enough and form the NBVB, the Netherlands Beroeps Voetbalbond, a professional league that flips the script. They import stars like Faas Wilkes back from Italy, pay players openly, and run parallel to the KNVB's amateur setup. The Wild League exists because the KNVB wouldn't budge on pros, so these clubs create their own world to test the water's higher salaries, full-time training, and imported talent to boost the spectacle. Success? Measured by the crowds, Wild League games drew 20,000 plus fans on average, way more than the KNVB's 10,000, with revenues spiking from gates and excitement. Coaches were mixed. English ones like Crook at Ajax quietly supported it, seeing amateurism as outdated and holding back tactical growth. The impact on players? Wild League teams were flashy and innovative, but the split caused inconsistency, talent divided, games boycotted, performance uneven across the board. The KNVB even banned wild players from the national team, adding to the drama.
But before we dive deeper into that split, let's pause on a tragic event that tested the nation's resilience and indirectly fueled the push for change. The 1953 North Sea flood, or watersnoodramp. It hit suddenly on January 31st to February 1st, right in the heart of winter, when gale force winds and a massive storm surge combine with high spring tides to overwhelm the dikes. The sea rushes in, breaching over 150 spots and flooding vast swaths of the southwest Netherlands provinces like Zeeland, a low-lying area known for its Dutch ethnic roots. Farming communities and coastal vulnerability get hit hardest. 1,836 people drown, mostly in Zealand's small villages where entire families are swept away. 187,000 animals perish, and 47,300 buildings are destroyed or damaged. For Ajax, up in Amsterdam, the impact is less catastrophic, but still felt their Het Houten Stadion suffers minor flooding, with the wooden stands warping from the water and the pitch turning into a soggy mess. Repairs cost about €22,500, or $25,000 today, funded by club dues and member contributions, and it takes a few weeks of draining and fixing to get back to playable condition. Nationally, the damage tallies to around €675 million, or $750 million today, spurring the massive Delta Works project, a decades-long engineering marvel to prevent future disasters. Ajax steps up in the recovery, organizing charity games that raise about €45,000 or $50,000 today for relief efforts. The flood becomes a turning point. It unites the country in grief and rebuilding, highlighting how outdated systems like amateur football weren't enough for a modernizing society. Fans and players alike see it as a call for progress, pushing the debates on professionalism even harder.
And that pressure explodes with the Wild League's success. Those packed stadiums and buzzing revenues prove pros' work, threatening to eclipse the KNVB entirely. Ajax stays loyal to the KNVB, and fans and media largely see it as a principled stand, preserving tradition amid the storm. But younger supporters are frustrated, craving the Wild League's thrill. The last straw for the KNVB? The Wild success measures up starkly. Their games pull in double the crowds and revenues, draining talent and exposing the amateur system's flaws. By November 1954, with strikes raging and the national team bans backfiring, KNVB President Karel Lotze, under heavy government pressure to unify for economic stability, leads the merger on November 25th. It's a full absorption. The NBVB dissolves, and the KNVB takes over as the pro-overseer.
This whole shift mirrors Dutch society in such a profound way. It's like the country shedding its wartime skin. Post-World War II, depillarization is kicking in, where the rigid pillars start crumbling under the weight of an economic boom fueled by the Marshall Plan aid from America, turning the Netherlands from a battered agrarian nation into an industrial powerhouse. Youth are rebelling against the old rigidity, demanding more freedom, and pro football breaks that amateur purity, wide open, embracing globalism with English coaches and international talent. The polder model, which is the Dutch way of consensus building, named after the polders, or reclaimed lowlands where everyone had to cooperate to keep the water out, comes into play in the merger, avoiding a full schism, which is basically a complete and bitter division that could have split Dutch football forever. It's liberation from wartime control and pressures, from the oppression of occupation to individualism, from flood-induced unity pushes to a society ready for cultural shifts, like the 1960s counterculture. Football becomes a symbol of that freedom.
And financially, it's a game changer too. Pre-pro, clubs like Ajax were non-profit associations' revenue from member dues and gates brought in about €22,500, or $25,000 today, a year, with sponsors trickling in from pillar networks. Spending was low, no real salaries. Debt minimal at around €4,500, or $5,000 today. Post-merger, salaries kick in at about €225, or $250 today, a month for starters. Budgets double or triple to €45,000 to €90,000, or $50,000 to $100,000 today. Gates rise with bigger crowds of 15 to 20,000, plus early TV and radio deals adding another €4,500 to €9,000, or $5,000 to $10,000 today. Clubs take loans of €22,500 to €45,000, or $25,000 to $50,000 today. For the transition, repaid through those surging gates and new sponsors. The first year is chaotic, some debt piles up, but revenues jump 30 to 50%, and it makes sense long-term as the pro era stabilizes.
That leads straight to the Eredivisie's founding on August 28th, 1956. 18 teams, 34 games in a round-robin format where everyone plays home and away. Policies focused on pro salaries and transfers to attract talent, mandatory youth academies to nurture the next generation, and fair play rules to keep the spirit alive while ditching the strict amateur bans. The first president was Karel Lotzi, steering from the HQ in Utrecht back then, now in Zeist at the KNVB campus. The merger meant the NBVB fully dissolved, with the KNVB absorbing everything and evolving into the pro overseer. Big Three, Dominance Ajax, PSV, Feyenoord winning 78 of 135 titles to date, has tempered smaller clubs, but a new team is still possible. You start in the lower Eredivisie, build infrastructure costing €5 million plus today, and earn promotion through playoffs or top spots. Prizes have evolved massively. Winners got about €22,500, or $25,000 today, back then. Now it's 18 to €20 million plus from the €1 billion shared TV pot. Per win was a bonus of €450, or $500 today, in the early days. Now, €100,000 plus. It's all about equal revenue sharing to aid parity, with policies like salary caps debated over the years for better or worse.
Now, the man at the heart of it all, Rinus Michels. Born in 1928 in a working-class Amsterdam neighborhood near the Olympic Stadium, he grew up with a factory worker father and homemaker mother, learning grit on the streets during the occupation. He served in the army, became a physical education teacher, PE for short, coaching gymnastics to deaf kids, and married Will Hulsbosch. His strict, no-nonsense style earned him the nickname The General from the press and players, especially after a famous 1969 interview where he dropped the controversial quote, "Football is war," drawing from his military background to emphasize tactical ruthlessness in a post-World War II world still sensitive to such language.
Michels' coaching journey starts at GOS Amsterdam from 1960 to 1964, an amateur working-class club near his home with a history of focusing on youth development since the 1920s. He chose it for familiarity and to test his ideas, promoting them to the top amateur tier in 1962. Though no major trophies. What he learned there, discipline and fitness drills that became his hallmark, plus early experiments with the offside trap and player versatility, honing his teaching skills from his PE days.
By 1965, Ajax is in crisis, sitting 15th and staring at relegation under Vic Buckingham, the English coach who'd been sacked in January after a string of poor results that had the fans worried and the board desperate. They turned to Michels because he's an Ajax alum who'd played his entire career there from 1946 to 1958, scoring 121 goals in 269 games and captaining the side. Plus, his success at Joas showed he could turn things around with limited resources, and as Reynolds' protege, he knew the club's DNA inside out. Immediate changes hit like a storm. He switches to a fluid 4-3-3 formation, ramps up daily training drills for fitness and technique, and integrates youth talents like Johan Cruyff, who debuted just before. It saves them from the drop. They finished 13th that season, and by 1966, they're champions, the start of a revolution.
His achievements at Ajax from 1965 to 1971 are legendary. 4 Eredivisie titles in 1966, 67, 68, and 70. The 1966 one was dominant, with a plus 57 goal difference that crushed the league. 68 was a nail-biter, one on goal difference against Feyenoord in a tense finale where every goal felt like destiny. 3. KNVB Cups. 1967's 2-1 win over NAC Breda, where Cruyff's brace in extra time turned a gritty battle into triumph. 1970's 2-0 shutout of PSV, showcasing Cruyff's magic, and 1971's 3-2 thriller against Sparta, a pre-European boost with last-minute heroics. Then, the 1971 European Cup. The path included a 17-0 aggregate demolition of 17 Nentori, a 4-2 win over Basel, a dramatic 3-1 aggregate against Celtic, 3-0 home blowout, then a tense 0-1 away hold where the defense stood like a wall, and a 5-1 semi-final thrashing of Atletico, with Cruyff's hat-trick sealing it. The final at Wembley, 2-0 over Panathinaikos, with Dick van Dijk's header and Ari Hahn's strike. Drama in the tense first half as the underdog Greeks pushed hard, but Ajax's interchanges overwhelmed them. He favored players like Cruyff as the roamer dictating everything, Johan Neeskens as the box-to-box engine, and Piet Keizer as the visionary winger. Tactics leaned on pressing and interchanges, turning near-relegation chaos into kings of Europe, from the brink of dropping to a lower division to reigning as continental champions. And the academy, heavy reliance, 70% of the squad homegrown, pulling from the toekomst to create that seamless, intelligent flow.
This all leads to the birth of total football, where Michels refines Reynolds' early seeds into something revolutionary. Reynolds played a more structured 4-2-4, focusing on possession and wingers with about 5 or 6 players committing to attacks solid, but limited by amateur fitness and less emphasis on swaps. Michels evolves it to a fluid 4-3-3 that morphs into 3-4-3 on the fly, pulling 7 or 8 attackers forward as fullbacks overlap and mid-surge like waves. The player differences are key. Reynolds had versatile but part-time amateurs like Wim Andriessen in midfield, no full interchanges. Michels had elite, academy-fit youth like Cruyff and Neeskens, technically sharp and endurance-built for constant swaps. The offside trap, it's a high defensive line stepping up in perfect unison to catch attackers offside if they're ahead of the last defender when the ball's played. It works with aggressive pressing to recover high, compressing space, but risks counters if mistimed a heartbeat away from disaster.
And that famous 1969 plane chat, it's during a tense flight to Madrid for the European Cup final against Milan, which they lose 4-1 in a humbling lesson. Cruyff, just 22, but already a visionary, pulls Michels aside mid-air and says something like, "Coach, we need more fluidity. Let players swap positions freely, press higher to suffocate them, and use the space like a canvas." It's memorable because it sparks an emotional turning point. Michels, the strict mentor, listens to his prodigy, refining the interchanges and offside trap that leads straight to the 1971 victory. The military influence from Michels' army days and PE background adds that boot camp discipline, like turning the pitch into a battlefield with his war, quote, emphasizing ruthless tactics.
But it wasn't without criticisms. It requires elite talent and isn't scalable for every team. Sometimes it's overly aesthetic, ignoring cold pragmatism. Writers like David Winner in his book Brilliant Orange pointed this out, and coaches like Arrigo Sacchi, a pragmatist who admired but critiqued it, highlighted how the beautiful flair could falter against gritty counters. The context? The 1974 World Cup final loss, 2-1 to Germany, where Dutch artistry met West German efficiency and came up short. Reception was mixed. The Dutch romanticized it as moral victors, celebrating the style. Critics called it idealistic, pushing for balance. It did change things, evolving into more pragmatic versions, like Pep Guardiola's tiki-taka at Barcelona, or Jurgen Klopp's gegenpressing at Liverpool, blending beauty with results.
Now, the golden era from 1965 to 1973, oh sigh, this is where the magic truly explodes. Different from Reynolds' 1930s, golden age in every way. Back then, it was pre-professional. Local dominance, with 5 titles in an amateur world structured attacks, but physical and pillar-bound, relying on versatile locals like Piet van Reenen. Michels' era, it's professional, global, and fluid, with the academy as the heartbeat 70% homegrown stars like Johan Cruyff, Johan Neeskens, and Ruud Krol turning the pitch into a symphony. Outsiders like Velibor Vasovic, the Yugoslav sweeper, at that steel. The games? They're inspirational trips, heart-pounding dramas that make you feel the unconquered spirit alive. Take the 1969 European Cup final loss, 1-4 to Milan. A naive thrashing that stings like a lesson from the gods, but it fuels the fire. Then 1971's final, 2-0 over Panathinaikos at Wembley. Dick Van Dijk's towering header opens it, Ari Haan seals it, with Cruyff orchestrating like a maestro in a tense first half, where the Greek underdogs push, but crumble under the interchanges. 1972 against Inter, 2-0. Cruyff's brace, including a last-minute drama where a penalty miss nearly lets Inter back in, but the defense holds like warriors. 1973 versus Juventus, 1-0. Johnny Rep's early goal, then tense saves in the dying minutes as Juventus bombard pure edge-of-your-seat magic. And the fog game in 1966-67, 5-1 over Liverpool, mist so thick you can barely see. But Ajax's trap turns it into a ghostly triumph. Cruyff dancing through the haze. These weren't just wins, they were inspirations, showing a team rising from near-relegation ashes to European kings, proving soccer's alive with that electric, unbreakable magic.
But even in the glory, egos clashed like sparks in the fire. Cruyff's fiery personality, that unshakable belief in his vision, butted heads with Michels' strict, military-like discipline. It all boils over in 1973 with the captaincy vote. The team picks Piet Keizer over Cruyff, and he storms out in a rage, feeling undervalued after carrying the side. The board rifts deepen. Cruyff demands more influence on tactics and decisions, threatening to quit if ignored, creating this emotional storm where loyalty and ambition collide. It's tense, heartbreaking even, but it pushes everyone harder, turning personal drama into the fuel for legends.
Totally. Sigh from the rebuilt ashes to the total football fire that lights up the world. We've unlocked the revolution, but it sets the stage perfectly for our next chapter.
Yeah, and speaking of that, on the next episode, we dive deep into the conductor himself. Johan Cruyff, the prodigy who takes total football to new heights, his ego, his genius, and the legacy that echoes today. You ready to keep the quest going?
Born ready-made. Stick with us, everyone, if you're hooked on these layers of Ajax philosophy. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the conversation in the comments. What's your favorite total football moment?
Thanks for unlocking episode 2 with us. Until next time, keep the ball moving, stay unconquered, and we'll see you in episode 3.
Ajax forever. Take care.